obviously saw Casemiro grab the headlines for all the wrong reasons after the first half performance that he put in. There's suggestions that they're trying to get him a move to Turkey, to Galatasaray. He's saying he will fight that. What's interesting is that Ugarte, of course, coming in, but what happens if he doesn't work, or what happens if he gets injured? That leaves Manchester United really down, doesn't it, to the bare bones? And I know Casemiro, we discussed it a lot, isn't the player that he was, obviously, a few years ago, but that leaves him incredibly vulnerable, doesn't it, in midfield if he does go to Turkey?
Yeah, and everybody's expecting Ugarte to come in and be the saviour, this person who's, of course, he's only had a year at PSG, and anybody who watched PSG last year, certainly in the midfield area, will see that nobody, probably Vitinha was the only one who stood out. You know, even Fabian Ruiz, who had a lovely time in the Euros, who was amazing, didn't play well for PSG. So Ugarte coming in relatively cheap and leaving a year later for £50 million. As Craig said, who says he's going to come in there and be amazing? The main thing is that United need to have a plan of how to play, don't they? Anybody who watches United and has done for a number of years still, to this day, don't know how they play. Are they going to play out from the back? Are they going to, play through the pitch? Are they going to get it wide? Are they going to, be like Alex Ferguson's old team and have two wingers and two centre forwards? Nobody knows. It just seems to be get 11 players on the pitch and let's hope we get a result. And I think that's the bigger issue. Yes, Højlund's, injured, and they can keep chirping on about that, but he never had the greatest first season last year. He has to improve tenfold. Rashford has to improve tenfold to be like the form that he showed a couple of years ago where he was outstanding. Garnacho needs to step up now in his relatively second year. And they need ball winners, and they need to be strong defensively in midfield. You can't rely on Kobe Mainoo. Absolutely not, as a 19-year-old. He's only a young boy still learning the game. You cannot rely on him. McTominay's gone who did a good job when called upon. Mount injured. Eriksen's old. So, yes, they need Ugarte to come in and be an absolute superstar from the first minute. Otherwise, it's going to be back to the same old problems. They can't stop conceding goals.
Do you get rid of Casemiro, Shaq?
No. I think right now, Justin and Maka detailed it well, in that position, they're just too thin on the ground. The issue is, I don't trust, and don't get me wrong here, I think Casemiro has been one of the best players in his position in a generation. But he's at that stage now, particularly, while I like the idea of somebody with his experience alongside Kobe Mainoo, inexperience and coming through, I just feel against the better teams in the league, he will get found out. But it's a long old season. It's 38 league games, Champions League and Cups. I think there are opportunities there to rotate, to get Casemiro in, to provide that experience and opportunity for Kobe Mainoo. But that opportunity doesn't come against the Man Cities and the Arsenals and, dare I say, the Liverpools of the league.
He's got this marvellous thing called a contract.
Yeah, he's got 2 years left on his contract. It's like 300 grand, isn't it, a week?
I wouldn't imagine he's a man that is going to be pushed around if he doesn't want to do anything. And look, he's not going to play as badly as he did at the weekend going forward. He might not be able to do it week in, week out anymore at the highest level when the game's very quick. But as Shaq said, they're so thin on the ground. McTominay's at Napoli. They haven't got any. They're bringing a youngster in Collier, young boy. So they haven't. It's a long old season for them. They've got a lot of football to play. Whether they just couldn't give a stuff about that and think we just need to get the wages off. We wouldn't mind getting the wages off. That's a different matter.
Yeah.
But from a footballing perspective, then that is one of the positions, the middle of the park, where they are super thin on the ground. And of course, as you said, Ugarte could come in, might not play particularly well, might get injured. So could young Mainoo. What the hell were they going to do in the middle of the park? So I think they have to be careful in this scenario. They signed him in this long contract, and they may have to suck up the wages, even if he doesn't play every week from the start, particularly in the league.
Sunday's game between Manchester United and Liverpool could hardly have gone any worse for Erik ten Hag, aside from the calamitous performance by Casemiro, who was substituted at half-time. He then had to listen to Liverpool boss Arne Slot effectively talk through his tactics in a public forum after the game.
Now we're going into the first international break of the season. 3 Premier League games in, 2 defeats. There's already talk of Ten Hag's job being under threat, having signed a new contract in the summer. So Rob, I know you spoke to some of the leadership at United on Sunday. Is his job safe?
They say it is. And just a bit of background on that. So we saw Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada in the United boardroom before the Liverpool game. It's important to stress that we saw him before the Liverpool game. There was an expectation that perhaps we would have seen some of the new leadership team on the US tour in the summer. We have done in the past when it's been other people in charge. It's kind of viewed as a more relaxed environment. Their reason for not seeing us on the US tour was that the transfer window was still in full swing. They were thinking about all these deals that they had to do. They didn't want to sort of comment on players who may or may not be coming in, so they wanted to give a bit of breathing space between the transfer window and them talking to reporters, which is why they did it before the Liverpool game, just to kind of explain really I suppose the new era at Man United and how they've approached this first window. So the top line that came out of that chat with Barada and Ashworth was that they are backing Erik ten Hag. People in the room made the point that you're saying this ahead of a game that could see United lose relatively heavily. That they were fully aware that may happen. Obviously, they didn't want it to, but they were fully aware that might happen. And the line was that they are in full support of him. They gave him, or they triggered that 1 year extension to his contract in the summer for a reason, and that he is the manager, as they called it, for their project. The only thing that I think is worth saying on this, a minor point I suppose, was that both Ashworth and Barada made the point very specifically that the decision to extend Erik ten Hag's contract predated them coming in. So they started officially in July. Dan Ashworth before, Omar Barada. The decision to extend Erik ten Hag's contract was made public in June. Now, whether you think that they were already kind of in their roles in a back seat is beside the point. They were very specific in that this decision about Erik ten Hag's contract was made before they started work. So they have distanced themselves a little bit.
Well, it's not the most ringing endorsement, is it?
It's not, but the contract in itself isn't either. In that, again, there was, or we were told when they made the decision to stick with Erik ten Hag that now new contract talks would take place. The expectation was that they would discuss a new contract, that it would be new set of terms, new set of responsibilities for the manager, and perhaps a 2 or 3 year deal to take him forward. In the end, what happened was there was already a 1 year extension built into his existing contract when he joined from Ajax, and instead of negotiating new terms or a new role for Ten Hag, all they did was trigger that extension. So now he's under contract for an extra year till 2025.
One point of this podcast is to kind of cut through not the nonsense, but kind of the spin and the PR. And I think Jamie Carragher said after the game at the weekend on Sky that, let's be honest, Man United were meeting agents and managers all over Europe, and they were. We know that. I mean, we've all read. I think we all read that Gareth Southgate was very high on their list as early as February, March. They spoke to, I think, Kieran McKenna, Mauricio Pochettino, Thomas Tuchel, and they were not shy about this. And even back in February, March time, when I wrote about Southgate, there was no pushback from the club. It was almost like, well, it is what it is. Now, the reality is that Erik ten Hag surprised us all by winning the cup final against Man City. None of us expected it. And he, at the end of the game, I was at the game that day, you were at the game, he was waving to the fans. He was tapping his blazer as if to say, there you go, thanks for all your love and support. There's the FA Cup, I'm off. He expected to go. Now, a week or two later, as we know, I mean, the day before the report saying he was going to be sacked.
Again, no pushback from the club.
No pushback. But I think, I pretty much know.
And also Ten Hag wasn't told that was wrong.
Yeah, but I've been told since that the ownership was surprised by the strength of feeling towards Ten Hag, and I think they realised that Gareth Southgate was always a hard sell because for whatever reason he's deemed to be England manager, haven't won anything. I think that's very harsh, but still, it was a hard sell at the time. It's an even harder sell when the guy that you're about to sack has just won the FA Cup. So I think INEOS looked at it and thought, we've got a lot of changes behind the scenes this year. We've got Dan Ashworth, Barada coming in, and one thing that was mentioned to me was they can't really make such a significant decision as the new manager without their guys in place. And like you say, Barada arrived in June. They didn't expect Dan Ashworth to be in place until September the earliest.
That was a very late deal.
Exactly. So it was like, well, we've got a lot of change coming. Why add to the churn by getting rid of the manager? Let's kind of the window dressing of this new deal, which wasn't a new deal, it was just an extension. And let's see how we go. Now, as we know, they started badly. He's not the INEOS guy. He's not Barada's guy. He's not Ashworth's guy. When clubs change ownership or change regime, within a year, it's very, very rare that the manager stays. I think that Ten Hag is on thin ice already. They might say it is, but that was before the game against the weekend, so we'll see.
No one at the club is denying that this is a very difficult relationship now between Ten Hag and the new ownership. Now, Dan Ashworth, when we spoke to him on Sunday, was very, very keen to stress that they have got on. He said they've got on very well for the last 8 weeks, and they've played a full part together in this transfer window. But there are people at United who are viewing this relationship. The way they put it, it's like a married couple where one party's had an affair, and now they're trying to get back together. They're trying to make it work. There's no denying, though, that is a very, very difficult thing to do. Ten Hag is fully aware that they went out, like you said, to speak to a load of other managers, and for a number of different reasons, arrived back at Erik Ten Hag. And you're right, because I bumped into someone after walking out of the cup final, actually, at Wembley, someone who's close to Ten Hag, and actually said to him, "This is great, great chance for Erik to stay now." And he went, "Nah, I don't think so. I think that's, what a way to end, but no, I don't think so." At some stage, I think to do with a number of different factors, they've arrived back at Erik Ten Hag, and you're right, because of that uncertainty, there is a doubt now about Erik Ten Hag's job every time they have a negative result, because the two things that cost managers' jobs are new owners who come in and want their own man, and poor results. And at the moment, Ten Hag is dealing with both of those things.
I also think that, obviously it's now a case of how much pressure is there going to be on him. In a way, the international break is great because it means that, he's not got another game that he could lose in 3 days' time. And look, that's Southampton. Is it Southampton away they've got? That's what if they don't win that,
it's horrible.
It's an absolute.
It's loot, because you have to win, and if you don't win, you.
Yeah, but I think it puts a lot of pressure on Ten Hag more than is sort of standard in these scenarios, to have a pundit like Jamie Carragher basically publicly state what has been written. It's not new information, but I think when there's paper talk and there's stuff that we write and there's things that there's sort of a degree of separation from that. But I think when you're covering that game in that capacity, and they're interviewing the managers, they're speaking to he stood on the pitch saying it at Old Trafford. I think it brings it into a different perspective for a lot of the audience, a lot of the supporters, who can now effectively take that as fact, which is not to say they wouldn't believe us and they'd believe Jamie Carragher, but I think there's probably some people who would in that situation. And do you know what I mean? I think
it's a different voice, and it's certainly, I don't know.
But it's now become an accepted part of the conversation around Ten Hag. That they wanted another manager in the summer. Whereas I think before Sunday, it felt as though, yes, there are people who are saying that. Yes, it's been written in a lot of places. We've said it on our site. Both of you guys have been across that story from the get-go. But when you've got someone with that profile in the stadium, covering the game, effectively stating that as fact, it is putting Ten Hag under huge pressure in the eyes of the watching public.
And Jamie Carragher does a column for The Telegraph at the weekend. I thought it was a really good column, and it's something that hadn't really occurred to me, but when you read it, it's so obvious that it's right. He said that this feels like the end days of Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool. Now, Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool went into his final season with a dispute, kind of a play dispute over it in terms of recruitment, that Liverpool wanted to sign Roberto Firmino, he wanted to sign Christian Benteke, and they signed both. They didn't really want Benteke, but they wanted to back the manager. Now, this summer we've seen at United, they've brought in some of Ten Hag's targets and some of the club's targets. It's almost like a twin approach. But the point that Carragher made was that the winds of change were already there, and Brendan Rodgers was sacked by the October international break. Now, Erik Ten Hag, or Man United, have got 7 games now between now and the October international break. So they'll come back after this international break, Southampton away. 7 games. Now, he's got Manuel Ugarte from PSG. That is the big signing, because that means that the Casemiro problem is solved to a certain extent. Hopefully, he's the final piece of the jigsaw in many ways. Now, Manuel Ugarte, the poor guy that he is, has got massive pressure on there to be this saviour, and he probably isn't, but Ten Hag has to make it work now. And if in those 7 games United don't turn it around, they've got some tough games. Southampton away, Aston Villa away, tough game. They've got Champions League games. I think they've got a Fenerbahce just after the international break, the October international break. I think Erik Ten Hag is now in a situation where he's got 7 games to save his job. It might sound ridiculous, but if in the next 7 games the situation is as bad as it is now, Gareth Southgate by then will have been on a 3-month holiday, He knows Dan Ashworth very well. He knows Dave Brailsford very well. He's a big part of the INEOS project. Now, right from day one when I wrote about Gareth Southgate at Man United, I was bombarded with, that's rubbish, you're just saying that because you like Southgate. It's not, we write what we're told, not what we want. And that's what, this kind of misconception sometimes. Now, I'm not saying here that Gareth Southgate was the Man United manager not told. I'm not saying that, but he's available. People at the club like him. They're clearly not sold on Ten Hag. And if in the next 7 games it doesn't work, then the difficulty they had after the FA Cup final because he just won a trophy will have gone, because by October, if they're 10th in the table, then...
Well, and again, I think Jamie Carragher is really, really good, by the way, just for the record. But I think one of the good point he made as well is Arne Slot already has got changes, patterns of play you can see in Liverpool in 3 games. And I remember Postecoglou was the same last year. Straight away he came in at Tottenham and you thought, okay, this is a different team, and you can see the ideas that might not be working all perfectly, but you can see there is an absolute coached methodology with largely the same group who are now trying to do something different. You still watch that team, United, and you still think it's just a collection of individuals, and you're hoping that somebody's going to do something.
It could have been day one.
I can't. That's the thing I can't understand about Sunday, is that we saw at the end of last season with the Palace game, that humiliation, the 4-0, that they were just far too open. Palace sprinting through midfield, Casemiro all over the place, having to cover huge amounts of space. And then after Palace, he made this really conscious decision to be more compact, be harder to break down, almost play a little bit on the break. They had a couple of decent results. Newcastle at home, which could have gone the other way, but was Brighton away. Brighton were struggling at the end, but they still went there and won and beat City. And all of a sudden, you're playing Liverpool at home, and those same problems are there again. That you've got Casemiro roaming around midfield in huge spaces, Mainu diving into challenges because he just can't cover the space quick enough. And then you're looking at Liverpool with this really coherent, slick midfield structure where McAllister's going and Gravenberch is dropping in, or Gravenberch is going, McAllister's dropping in. United didn't run through Liverpool once.
Do you know it's a big part of the problem that it rarely gets highlighted, and Ten Hag has not yet, after 2 seasons and a bit, worked out to play with Bruno Fernandes, because Bruno Fernandes at times plays like a kid in the playground. He has got no kind of defensive discipline. He spends most of his time in the attacking third, and when you see that United are being hit on the counter-attack and Casemiro having to put out fires, Bruno Fernandes is 30 yards away, with his arms in the air saying, come on lads, defend. So now Bruno Fernandes is a very talented player. He's the team captain. He has signed a new contract in the summer, but I think Ten Hag has to find a way to assimilate him into the system. He's not done it, and he's supposed to be the best player. So as much as Casemiro is, sadly, yesterday's man, he's not being helped by the people around him. Now, just on what you made a really good point about Postecoglou and Slot, I think it's different with Slot because he's inherited a much better squad that Ten Hag walked into, but the confidence, the authority that Slot projects is very impressive. Totally different to Ten Hag. But Postecoglou, the same character, same personality. You could argue that the squad he has at Tottenham is on a par with United. They've got some great players. Son Heung-min, fantastic player, but generally, like for like, there's not much between those squads. But the difference at Tottenham to Man United is night and day. The vibe, everything, the tactics, and Ten Hag, I think he's running out of things to point to apart from his trophies. Now, great, he's won 2 trophies, fantastic. But let's not forget, they finished bottom of the easiest Champions League group they ever had last year, behind Copenhagen and Galatasaray. They finished 8th in the Premier League. 8th. But he's talking at trophies.
Should we, to flip it on its head though, should we say, well look, when Højlund comes back, when Ugarte gets up to speed, De Ligt has had a few games, should we be saying, actually, if he's got his fully fit squad available, the squad that they've tailored over the course of the last 2 months, should we be judging him then rather than now?
See, I know that you said just then that you think that Ten Hag has got seven games to save his job, and I understand where you're coming from with that. I think that INEOS have got to stick with him now. They had a chance in the summer. They had, there would have been no massive fan reaction if Ten Hag had lost his job.
I think there would.
I don't think there would. People would have understood it. There would have been. Obviously, it depends who comes in, but there wouldn't have been people. Sensible Man United fans would have gone, oh yeah, maybe I wanted Ten Hag to stay, but I can understand it. We finished 8th. That's not good enough.
It was easy to keep him. On your point, who would they have got? I think that was the issue. They did want Southgate, but Southgate was an impossible one to do because England were in the Euros and sort of right to the final. United's first game was the day after in Oslo, so the timing didn't fit. It
and
didn't
he wouldn't
fit.
discuss it.
Exactly.
He
So-
was also told that a lot of managers who they spoke to were a little bit apprehensive because of the new structure that was being put in place. The managers that they spoke to were told that you'd have to answer to Barada, Ashworth and Wilcox in the main, and then they would make a decision, and then that decision would be put to a committee above them, which would be Radcliffe, Brailsford and Joel Glazer, and then that decision would either be seen through or scrapped. And someone like Thomas Tuchel looked at that after the problems he'd had at Bayern and went, that's too much. I'm not happy with how many hoops I've got to jump through, because ultimately I'm the guy that's going to get hired and fired on the result.
Tuchel doesn't fit their profile.
No.
Great manager that he is. It's sad to say, but he doesn't. They will want somebody who'll fit in that that kind of organism, I guess, and work into that approach. And I think McKenna was probably not ready for it. Pochettino, I think there was a few concerns that he was not very flexible with his backroom stuff. He always sets the same backroom stuff everywhere. And I think United wanted more control over that. Other ones that were in the mix, De Zerbi was in the mix. Again, there was concerns about De Zerbi. It tailed off very badly at Brighton. Now he's at Marseille.
Set fire to things at Brighton, didn't he?
Yeah, so there was no obvious kind of off ramp, as they say.
No,
so it was easy to keep Ten Hag, but believe me, Jim Ratcliffe is a very ruthless guy. He's made that clear with the change that he's made behind the scenes with getting rid of lots of people from the job. If it's not working with Ten Hag, his patience is way for thin as it is.
I just think that you've got to see it through now. I think that you had a golden opportunity to change if you wanted to. You've triggered his extension. Obviously, it's not the new deal that perhaps we all thought was going to happen. Ten Hag, none of the recruitment responsibility was taken off him in the summer. He played a full part in recruitment. We saw the players that he's had in the past have come in. All these players arrived with Ten Hag's sign off. Once you do that and you spend so much money and you put such a public show of faith in him, you have to see it through now, I think.
But can he really survive another season where they're 6th, 7th, 8th, getting beaten heavily home and away by the biggest teams?
Well, that's the question. What is your threshold of pain, I suppose? I
mean, you've seen it at close hand at Arsenal. It works at Arsenal because Ada and Mikel Arteta and Josh Kroenke kind of runs a club for his dad. They are a unit, but Arteta was their guy, and they backed him on that basis, haven't they? And I think Ten Hag, as he's not the INEOS guy, will never have that kind of support. That's why it works at Arsenal, because everybody knows the project or the philosophy, and it works. Until United get a manager that is the appointment of the owner, the regime of control, I think we're going to have this kind of uncertainty.
Well, I think the other thing about Arsenal is the ownership have been flexible to mould the sort of decision-making team around the manager. They, without going back through the whole history of it, when Arsene Wenger was there and he was sort of the autonomous figure, they then appointed 9 new department heads that were supposed to strip all of the kind of autonomy away from the manager, and it was supposed to be a much more sort of collective decision-making process. But as Arteta came in and sort of said, well, actually, we need to streamline this, and it's kind of gone back to the head coach who works with just one or two, the sporting director and Edu and Josh Kroenke and Per Mertesacker, who heads up the academy. They're kind of the decision-makers with Tim Lewis, who then goes to the board. So there's only about 4 or 5 people who are involved in it, and it just feels, again, perhaps if we're relating this slightly back to Chelsea with United, with all these kind of, let's be honest, INEOS don't fully run the club, right? There's still the Glazers involved as well. So you've kind of got the two families are still part of it. The two sort of, I wouldn't call them warring factions, but the two families with the two different visions, and a manager's got to sit in the middle of all that somewhere. And at Chelsea, they found it very difficult when you've got the Bowley and the Egbali sort of two sides of it. And with INEOS and with the Glazers, it feels as though it's a bit of a similar situation brewing there.
Casemiro transfer rumour to Man United shut down after medical exam for midfielder deal. Recent rumours of Casemiro being transferred from Manchester United to Galatasaray have been dismissed after reports surfaced about Sergio Oliveira undergoing medical tests ahead of a move to Olympiacos. Casemiro has been linked with a possible exit from United following a significant drop in performance since his standout debut season after arriving from Real Madrid in August 2022. His struggles were on full display during United's 3-0 loss to Liverpool, where he was substituted at halftime after committing crucial mistakes that led to 2 goals. Now, speculation is growing that Galatasaray is eyeing the midfielder as the Turkish transfer window nears its Friday, September 13th, closing. According to The Times, Casemiro is on Galatasaray's radar as part of their search for a strong midfield presence. This summer, Galatasaray has already made a statement with high-profile signings like Victor Osimhen on loan from Napoli, and they could add Casemiro through a similar approach. Their aggressive transfer window has also brought in Gabriel Serra, Elias Jalert, Ismail Jacobs, Hakim Ziyech, and Michy Batshuayi, reinforcing the squad for the upcoming season. On the other side of the equation, Galatasaray has made room by offloading several players, including former Leicester striker Tet, Wilfried Zaha, and Nicolo Zaniolo. Another departure appears imminent with Oliveira reportedly set to join Olympiacos, clearing even more space for a potential Casemiro deal. Oliveira, who hasn't made an appearance this season, played 24 games for Galatasaray last year, scoring twice. His exit opens up opportunities for Casemiro to step into the lineup as the club looks to strengthen their midfield options. Meanwhile, Casemiro may also see reduced playing time at Manchester United following the late addition of Manuel Ugarte from Paris Saint-Germain. Ugarte wasn't registered in time to play against Liverpool but is expected to make his debut post-international break against Southampton. Building him into the team will take time, United manager Erik ten Hag commented about Ugarte. It's not like I'm Harry Potter, and that's something everyone must realize. If you look at Manuel Ugarte, he hasn't played a minute this season yet. We'll need to build his fitness and integrate him into the team, but I'm confident he'll be a key player for us.